Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me tonight. It's my understanding that we're here to talk about Theranos and the Flint water crisis. Now, because we're talking about those two subjects, it's my understanding that you've watched both The Inventor, which talks more about Theranos, and The Poisoning of an American City, which talks more about the Flint water crisis. Each of these were wrong in different ways. Firstly, Theranos was wrong because they were messing with people's health, number one. Number two, there was definitely negligence on both the investor side as well as the checks and balances within the government. No real investigation of their facility was made, and everyone was kind of taking this at face value for what it was. Also understanding that that's how Silicon Valley kind of worked at the time. This grew to be a larger issue, and as the investor or the inventor said towards the end of the documentary, Silicon Valley has not been the same ever since this has taken place. When looking at the Flint water crisis, this to me is a much larger issue than the Theranos one. Number one, because the government itself did not do anything to help prevent the problem, even worsen the problem during the process, knowing that they weren't creating a good water system for the city of Flint, Michigan, displacing over 100,000 people out of their homes, and still charging them water bills, which I found absolutely astounding. The EPA is also not at fault, or not take any of the fault here. The EPA should have been involved from day one. As soon as the flag was raised about how bad the situation was in Flint, it baffles me that a government entity can tell another government entity that everything's just fine and dandy, without the checks and balances in place that we all know and helped get this country to where it is today. The ethical breaches on both. Theranos, for the first part, was more of a utilitarianism. They were focusing more on the consequences around not providing the one drop solution. And this is an interesting argument to me because Elizabeth Holmes truly believed in what she was doing and truly believed it would save the world. And I'm in the belief that in her mind, she thought the consequences of not completing what she set out to do and save lives and make that one drop really work was far greater of a consequence than the fraud that she was committing. The second one is more towards Flint. This one to me is more virtue. Um, you're looking at this from a holistic point of view and looking more toward the leaders within the government space, especially the governor at the time. He was morally corrupt. I said this previously as well, and I will probably say it again, which is I think when that within the documentary, when it showed that he got a standing ovation um, before giving the State of the Union by all of his peers, that to me was disgusting on many levels. There was many people suffering within that state at the time, and for the reaction that he got, um, yeah, I can't agree with that. I will never agree with that. He's morally corrupt in my mind, ethically corrupt in my mind, as well as kind of some of his peers that helped along the way, especially the emergency council that was assigned to Flint, Michigan. Um, I'm from the state of Virginia, so my senator actually stood up for Flint, Michigan, and the stack of papers that was pulled out in that documentary with not a single line item of Flint, Michigan and their problem really speaks volumes to how little they invested in the situation and how little they continue to invest in the situation without getting before getting help from the EPA. Some CSR failures I think both companies had here. Well, one being a company, one being the government. Um, Corporate social responsibility is something that should not be taken lightly. Theranos probably had more of an impact around CSR. Both have impacted people's health. I think Theranos impacted people's health at a greater length. They were giving people wrong diagnosis. They were making people take medicine that they should not be taking or missing diagnosis completely, which we can't link any specific deaths to that, but one would assume that there were consequences for those actions. Now, when looking at Flint, Michigan, You are the government. These people entrusted you. They put you in public office. You have a right, every responsibility to look out for those people. They did not do that. Not only did they do that, they cared so little about the people of Flint, Michigan, that it was number 36 on their list of action items for the year 2016, I believe. Um, Unbelievable that you, as a government who is pushing big companies to have more and more of a CSR, and you yourself cannot follow it to the simplest of ways. Um, it's also said in that documentary that the United States is not a third world country, and Flint, Michigan was treated as such. I mean, the findings of racial discrimination, I think, speak volumes, especially coming from an internal source. Good on those folks for raising the flag and making that issue known. I think there was definitely discrimination there. They seem forgotten, which is very sad that a population of that size can seem forgotten. Both of the stakeholders there were impacted, and I think Theranos grows to a greater level of stakeholders. Elizabeth Holmes was charged and convicted of fraud. Not only did she ruin the trust of the people using the device, but also the trust of her investors, the trust of her board, and worse off, the trust of her employees. Her and Sonny seem to implement somewhat of a fear tactic within the company. You can see it when you watch The Investor that people were scared to speak up, and once they did speak up, Theranos' legal team was attack dogs, to say it lightly. They used fear and threats to silence those who spoke out. Um, Definitely not a good work culture by any means. I think that's more of a case there than anything else. Also, Sonny was looking into people's emails, making sure they weren't talking about anything. I just don't understand how a company of that size can get away with something like that for so long when it had greater impacts to the individual's health. I don't know, across board, and I think Walgreens probably has some blame here as well. They did not do their due diligence when implementing that into many, many, many of their stores. Um, what makes the Theranos case a little bit different is I truly believe that Elizabeth Holmes thought what she was doing was right. I think that she thought that if she could solve this issue, it would impact the greater good. Uh, Lastly, um, both these cases may have dramatic impacts on the people affected by those. Theranos had a larger reach than I think the Flint, Michigan water crisis did, although from a corruption standpoint, I would put more of the corruption on the Flint, Michigan water crisis. Both went through legal action. I'm sure the people of Flint are probably still chasing that down, knowing how slow the process is, and all those impacted by Theranos are probably doing the same. And with that, I thank you and have a great rest of your night.